Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ben Vicarage on this Monday morning. Hope you've had a lovely weekend, and thank you, as always, for joining us for our Bible reflection for today, as we continue our adventure through the challenging but incredible book of Jeremiah. Today we're in chapter 7, so without further ado, eyes down, and here we go. It's Jeremiah and chapter 7. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord: stand in the gate of the Lord's house, and proclaim there this word, and say, hear the word of the Lord, all you people of Judah, you that enter these gates to worship the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your doings, and let me dwell with you in this place. Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. If you truly amend your ways and your doings, if you truly act justly with one another, if you do not oppress the alien, the orphan, and the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own hurt, then I will dwell with you in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your ancestors, for ever and ever. Here you are, trusting in deceptive words to no avail. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods that you've not known, and then come and stand before me in this place, in this house which is called by my name, and say, we are safe, only to go on doing all these abominations? Has this house, which has been called by my name, become a den of robbers in your sight? You know, I too am watching, says the Lord. Go now to my place that was in Shiloh, where I made my name dwell at first, and see what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. And now, because you've done all these things, says the Lord, and when I spoke to you persistently, you did not listen, and when I called you did not answer. Therefore, I will do to the house that is called by my name, and in which you trust, and the place which I gave to you and your ancestors, just as I did to Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight, just as I cast out all your kinsfolk, all the offspring of Ephraim. As for you, do not pray for this people. Do not raise a cry or a prayer on their behalf. Do not intercede with me, for I will not hear you. Do you not see what they are doing in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead dough and make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. And they pour out drink offerings to other gods and to provoke me to anger. Is it I whom they provoke, says the Lord? Is it not themselves to their own hurt? Therefore, thus says the Lord God, my anger and my wrath shall be poured out on this place, on human beings, on animals, on the trees of the field, and the trees, the fruit of the ground. It will burn and not be quenched. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices, and eat the flesh. For in the day that I brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to them or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. But this commandment I gave them: obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk only in the way that I command you, so it may be well with you. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but in the stubbornness of their evil will, they walked in their own counsels and looked backward rather than forward. From the day that your ancestors came out of the land of Egypt until this day, I persistently sent all my servants, the prophets, to them day after day. Yet they did not listen to me or pay attention, but they stiffened their necks. They did worse than all their ancestors did. So you shall speak all his words to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call them, but they will not answer you. You shall say to them, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, did not accept discipline. Truth has perished, it is cut off from their lips. Cut off your hair and throw it away. Raise a lamentation on the bare heights. For the Lord has rejected and forsaken the generation that provoked his wrath. For the people of Judah have done evil in my sight, says the Lord. They have set their abominations in the house that is called by my name, defiling it. And they go on building the high place of Topheth, which is the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in their fire, which I did not command, nor did it come out of my mind. Therefore the days are surely coming, says the Lord, when it will no longer be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, where they will bury in Topheth until there is no more room. The corpses of his people will be food for the birds of the air and for the animals of the earth, and no one will frighten them away. And I will bring to an end the sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of the bride and bridegroom in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, for the land shall become a waste. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. I've said many times that when you're doing the Bible, always look at the small print and also always try and feel your way around it. Well, listen to it with your heart as well as your head. And this morning's reading is a classic example of that. So where does it take place? Basically, Jeremiah goes to the temple, the major place of religion in the whole place, the temple. But he stands outside the gate. He doesn't go in, he stands outside. And imagine if this was kind of Westminster Abbey or one of these on some great state occasion. You got and rather than going inside, and you've got all these people going inside to meet God, and Jeremiah stands on the outside. And God speaks through Jeremiah on the outside, not on the inside. If you can imagine what's going on here. And then he talks about what's going on. So you've got these people coming in, and basically their lives are not matching up to what they're saying. They're going in for comfort. They're feeling as though because, as they say, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. They're obviously singing these words and saying these words. I'm feeling very comforted by the fact that, because this is the temple, it's there forever, and it will always be so, and so on. And there's enormous complacency as set in here. And what they're doing is they're saying one thing in their lives, but they're doing something very different when they get to the temple to worship. And it's kind of very, very difficult. And what he's basically saying is in verse 5 to 7, because bear in mind, Jeremiah speaking on God's behalf, he's outside. What he's basically saying, if you amend your ways, I will come in with you. So what he's saying is these people are going in there, they're talking, they're doing all the right words, but God isn't in there with them. What God is saying here through Jeremiah is, if in verse 5, if you truly amend your ways and do your ways, I will come in there with you. So rather than just going through empty words, your worship will be proper. So it's not good enough just to go into the temple. Your actions have to match the words that you say. And it's interesting, and as I say, the drama of this. I mean, this could be called treason at the time, I should imagine. Jeremiah, speaking about, stands outside looking in, and he's basically saying that, if you amend your ways, if you listen to me, then I'll come in with you. Then he goes on, he talks about what they've actually done to the temple, and in verse 11, you hear the words of Jesus. He talks about you've turned it into a den of thieves, a bit den of robbers, a bit like Jesus said when he went into the temple later. So you can imagine when Jesus Jesus goes into the temple in Jerusalem later, the people who were in the temple, who knew their Bibles well, will have remembered these words from Jeremiah chapter 7. So it adds, imagine Jesus going into the temple and, turning over the money changers and so on and everything else and saying these words. And of course, the people listening, they'll know what he's talking about here. And these words will be ringing in their ears big time. He also goes on to say what will happen if you don't. He talks about a place called Shiloh. Shiloh was a place in the northern kingdom which had been great in years gone by, but was now a ruin, a complete ruin. The back of the glory days when things had done well, from the early days when they crossed over from out of Egypt and so on. Shiloh had been a great place. Many great things had happened to Shiloh, but he knew, and they all knew, that Shiloh was now a complete ruin, as if the Shiloh mentioned in verse 14 here. So feel and hear the drama of what he's saying about, about the den robbers. And again, hear the drama of Jesus going into the temple and saying these words that they will have known so well because they knew the Bibles very well. And then he's talking about, if you carry on this way, it's going to happen unto you what happened unto Shiloh all those years ago. And that's a ruin now, and you'll be a ruin too one day if you carry on the way you are. Verses 21 to 25 is all about the importance of listening to God. And it's quite interesting because they're doing all these burnt offerings and sacrifices, and they're doing all these kind of religious things. And he says here, well, when I first brought you out of Egypt, I didn't tell you to do this type of thing. I told you to listen to me. That's what my main priority is. And he's saying to the people, look, this is fine, but your actions have got to do your words, and you have to obey and incline your ear. And so, but he's basically saying, unfortunately, because of the stubbornness of their evil, they've walked in their own counsels and looked backward rather than forward. And it's quite interesting because the things that you're doing are, you're worshipping other gods to your own hurt. In those days, they were actually sacrificing their children, these false gods and so on. This idolatry was doing them harm, and idolatry harms people to this day too. People are turning to bad ways, putting their trust in all sorts of other things when the only thing really you should put your trust in is God. And so feel the drama of what's going on here. So he says, if only the people would listen, then things would be better. And I'd go in there with them and they could worship me and so on. But unfortunately, they're turning to other ways instead. And then in verse 30 onwards, in some very poetic and very sort of devastating language. He talks about valleys of slaughter, and so that's what's to come. And of course, their complacency on the temple was borne out a few years later in 587 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar came along and sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, and so on. And the words of Jeremiah actually came true. They were taken, but a few years in Jeremiah's lifetime, it took place. The people were taken into exile. The desolation happened. The temple was destroyed just as God said he would. But again, I think the message to us today is this: let's make sure that our lives are being built on God, not just our words on a Sunday. We must make sure that we're not simply relying on the glories of the past and relying on, and everything else. The important thing is that we need to listen to God, and listen to God in this generation, not just live on borrowed grace from times that people have trusted God in the past, to make sure that we are hearing God today, that our faith is alive today, that actually, to remind you that when they came out of Egypt in the past, he didn't tell them to do all this sacrifices. That came later. But the most important thing was that you listen to God and do what God says. And that's the challenge to us today. Friends, I hope you found that helpful. God bless you. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely Monday and more tomorrow. God bless.